What's up, gamers? Last week I did a video on the Texas Chain Saw Massacre talking about the different victims and ranking them based off of their ability and playstyles. And this time I figured, you know what, it's only fair that I jump into the shoes of the serial killers themselves, the family. And that's what this video is all about today. I'm going to focus on the killers of the game, and I'm going to give you guys my personal ranking for each family member from worst to best. Now keep in mind, each of these family members play to unique playstyles, and you might have a completely different ranking than mine, and that's perfectly fine. Like I said, it depends on your own playstyle about which type of character works best for you. As a matter of fact, why don't you leave in the comments below, let me know what your personal rankings are and why. I love to get everybody's opinions, but again, this is just my own opinion, and I'm really curious to see how we compare, and I'm going to give you guys my reasons for why I rank them this way. Anyways, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and here is my ranking from worst to best of every family member in the Texas Chain Saw Massacre video game. Let's get it. Number 5, the cook. Wow, it actually feels kind of bad to put the head of the family behind grandpa at the bottom of the list, but honestly, the guy is old and it makes it difficult to use him. So let's talk about the different reasons why the cook is so low on the list. First off, his ability, Seek, is actually the best ability in the game in my own opinion. It allows him to listen for victims and then notify the other family members to exactly where these victims are at. So for that reason, you would think I would have the cook higher up on this list. As a matter of fact, he has an additional ability that I find extremely useful, and that is the fact that he can actually put additional padlocks on exit gates or other doors. So that way, the victims will have to unlock not one, but 2 different locks to escape through a specific door. Again, an extremely valuable resource that the cook has. So why do I have him so low on this list? It deals with a few different things. First off, he is the slowest family member on this list. Out of the entire family, because of his age, he's not able to keep up with the victims. As a matter of fact, his endurance is also very low, which means he can't even continue a chase for that long. He can't follow victims through crawl spaces. He can't follow them through cracks in the wall, which means usually if a victim goes through a crawl space while they are in a chase with the cook, chances are that victim is getting away from the cook. There is a very low chance that the cook is going to be able to catch up to the victim before the victim gets away and escapes. And even though the cook has the ability to listen for sounds, it's not as useful for the cook independently to kill a victim. Now, the cook is a great team player, so if you prefer helping out your team by trying to help locate the victims and focusing on that aspect, and you like putting padlocks around the map, then sure, the cook can be extremely useful. And again, this is why I said at the beginning of the video, depending on your playstyles, you might rank these differently. But for me personally, because of how slow the cook is and because of his endurance, it's hard to catch up to the victims. Yeah, he does deal the second most damage out of all the family members, just under Leatherface himself. But if you can't really reach the victims, dealing the most damage isn't as useful as it sounds, really. Number 4, Johnny. Johnny boy, oh Johnny boy. You know, you would think with his ability, Hunt, that allows him to actually follow the footsteps of victims to find their exact location, I would probably have Johnny a little bit higher on this list. And honestly, Johnny is probably a little bit more difficult for me to actually find a spot for him on this list because I'm back and forth about how I feel about him personally. But I ultimately left him at spot number 4 for a couple different reasons. First off, I think he's definitely a little bit more useful than the cook because he's actually able to move a little bit faster, and his endurance is actually pretty good, the second highest in the entire family, which means he can continue on a chase a lot longer than the rest of the family members except for one other. He also deals a decent amount of damage just behind the cook and Leatherface, so he's kind of like the more balanced character out of the entire family. So if you're looking for someone that is a little, not awful at anything in particular, then Johnny's probably your man. But overall, I have him at spot number 4 specifically because he can't follow victims through crawl spaces and cracks in the wall, and he's not extremely quick, which means he can't really catch up to the victims if they end up getting away through one of these spaces. So for that reason, when I'm playing as Johnny, I find myself in a position to where I see a lot of victims actually getting away from me because I'm not able to get around crawl spaces and cracks in the wall fast enough to catch them before they officially get away. Now, his ability does allow them to continue to track these victims, but you have to be in a specific area where these victims are located at in order to find their footsteps, and that takes time to actually find their footsteps, by the way. Now, his ability does combine perfectly with the cook's ability, because if the cook's able to locate exactly what area the victims are located at, and then Johnny gets to that area and then uses his ability to track the footsteps, it shouldn't be hard for Johnny to find those victims. But overall, I just don't love Johnny as a family member. But that's just my opinion. I'd love to know if you guys like Johnny. Do you think he should be higher on this list? Or do you think he should be at the bottom under the cook, actually? Because I actually contemplated putting him lower than the cook just because I really like the cook's additional padlocks ability. I don't know why I like that ability so much. Let me know in the comments, what do you guys think? Number 3, Leatherface. So Leatherface's ability is, you guessed it, the chainsaw. The chainsaw is the unique ability that Leatherface has, and it's actually pretty useful for a ton of different reasons. It can destroy those barricades that victims jump over, and he's the only one that's able to destroy those barricades. The entire family is not actually able to get past that obstacle. They have to go around. Even Sissy and Hitchhiker, who can crawl through spaces, can't even get over those barricades. Only Leatherface can destroy those barricades. Not to mention, his chainsaw deals a lot of damage. As a matter of fact, Leatherface is the highest dealing damage family member in the game. His speed is pretty decent, his endurance is the highest in the game, and he is able to move quicker if he uses the chainsaw correctly. But what really makes Leatherface stand out, in my personal opinion, has to do with the damage that he deals if you use them correctly. Because the fact of the matter is, Leatherface has an instant kill attack. If you rep the chainsaw right before the point to where it stalls out, and you make contact with the victim right at the exact moment that you need to make contact with, you instantly kill that victim regardless of how much HP they have at that time. So with all this in mind, why don't I have Leatherface higher up on this list? Well, actually, it comes down to the same ability that makes him one of the more powerful family members, and that is the fact that the chainsaw stalls. If you are in a chase and you are trying to use that ability to get that instant kill, but you time it incorrectly, Leatherface's chainsaw stalls out, and then you're not able to attack at all, which means you now have to start up the chainsaw again, so that way you can do some damage to the victims. So if you don't actually use trial and error to actually learn how to use Leatherface correctly and get that chainsaw maneuver down, then you can find yourself letting other victims get away. Also, the fact that he's not able to follow victims into crawl spaces or cracks in the wall, and that he has to go the long way around, is somewhat disappointing, but again, it makes sense because he is a bigger figure that does a lot more damage. But he does deserve spot number 3 above the cook and Johnny, specifically because he's able to destroy barricades, he's able to destroy crawl spaces even, and the amount of damage he does, especially if he lands his instant kill attack, just puts him way above Johnny and Cook. Number 2, Sissy. So probably the most intelligent killer in the family. She has some really unique attributes that actually help her catch the victims and make sure they don't get away, while also dealing some consistent damage throughout her encounter with the victims. For example, she has the ability known as Bane, which allows her to use this poison powder in unique ways. Rather it be spraying this poison powder on a car battery, so that way for the next minute or so, the victims, when they interact with this car battery, they receive injuries and damage. Or she uses it to block a specific path, so when the victims run into it, they get confused or, again, take some damage. Or my personal favorite way to use this powder is actually to put it in key items like a fuse or even healing items, so that way whenever a victim picks them up, they actually get poisoned and take damage. Sissy has so many different ways you can use her ability to your personal advantage, and it's all about your playstyle and how you want to use those abilities. And the great thing about Sissy's ability is that you can actually collect more powder throughout the map, which means it's kind of unlimited as long as you keep looking for the powder whenever you need it. She also has the highest harvesting base level, which means she's able to bring the most blood back to Grandpa and can get him to a higher level faster. But I think one of the best parts about Sissy is the fact that she's the second fastest family member in the game, and she's able to follow the victims through crawl spaces and cracks in the wall, meaning she's able to catch up with the victims and continue a chase for a pretty long time. Actually, if you run into Sissy, more than likely you're not getting away from her unless you can do one of 3 different things. 1, jump through a well. 2, you actually break that eye contact and you're able to hide away long enough for her to not be able to find you and move on. Or 3, you find a barricade that only Leatherface himself can actually destroy, and you jump over that and you break that contact with her and get away. Other than that, if you are just going through cracks in the wall or crawl spaces, guess what? Sissy can do those exact same things and move a lot faster than the rest of the family members. So you can't continue a chase with Sissy for long unless you find one of those other 3 ways to get away from her. And that's why she is so high up on this list. And the only reason why she doesn't take spot number 1 has to do with the unique perks that the next killer has. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Number 1, Hitchhiker. Yeah, of course, Hitchhiker is the number 1 for me personally. I'm sure you guys have been counting, and he's the last guy left. Now, there's a lot of different reasons why he's my number 1, but before I get to that, I want to say that the reason why I love this character so much is because he's just a nutcase. He is completely psychotic. I mean, sure, the entire family is psychotic, but something about this character's personality is just hilarious to watch when he interacts with both the family and the victims. He's my favorite character to watch from an entertainment side of things. But let's focus on the abilities and perks because that's actually what makes him the number 1 on this list, starting with his main ability, which is Trap. And basically, you guessed it, allows him to set traps for the victims. What's really cool about these traps though is that you can set them in key locations and then reuse them. And then unlike Sissy's trap ability, where she can like put a powder in a specific area and it stays there for a minute, these traps stays there until a victim actually activates it, which means you can put traps in front of a car battery or a generator, so that way when a victim tries to turn one of those off, they step directly into that trap and you get time to actually stop them before they turn that stuff off. Also, it's really fun to put it at the exit of the basement, so that way when they're like running out of the basement, they get really excited, and just like that, boom, they're trapped. But some of the things that also make Hitchhiker as the number 1 character to use, in my opinion, from the family is the fact that he is the fastest family member in the game, and that is extremely vital when you compare him to the rest of the family. He's even faster than Sissy, and actually he has a lot of the same traits as Sissy. Sissy's able to crawl through crawl spaces and go through gaps in the wall. Well, guess what? Hitchhiker can do this too, which means, like I mentioned with Sissy, there's only a few different ways you can actually escape from the Hitchhiker if he's on your trail. However, something that gives him a little more of an advantage compared to Sissy is the fact that Sissy actually goes around singing a lot, so you can usually always hear Sissy coming because of her consistently singing. Whereas the Hitchhiker, he doesn't make that much noise when he's moving around. He can definitely sneak up on you, and actually, in my opinion, he's one of the sneakiest characters outside of maybe Johnny out of the family members. So between the fact that he can set traps in key locations, and the fact that he is the fastest family member on this list, and that he's able to go through crawl spaces and cracks in the walls, and he's one of the stealthiest killers on this list, yeah, it's hard to not agree with the fact that the Hitchhiker deserves spot number 1 as the most dangerous and best character to use out of the family. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Games, guys. Like I said, hit up the comments, let me know your opinions down below. I want to know what you guys think. Obviously, there's a really good chance that our rankings are not going to match, and that's because each of these players play to a unique playstyle, and depending on what your playstyle is, you might like a character that I had at the bottom of my list. So hit up the comments, let me know what your rankings are and what your opinions are, and then who is your favorite family member to use that you think is the best in the number 1 spot for this list. Anyways, thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Nerd Space, guys. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like or dislike button if you enjoyed or hated this video, and share this video with your friends and family. And as always, guys, I will see you on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.